All right, it's December 4th, 2011, here with Frank George Easton, visiting my house in New Albany, Ohio. I'm Mark Easton, I'm his son. We're going to talk about his early years before going off to Korea, and then we'll talk about Korea, and then his return home. Frank, where were you born?
Cleveland, Ohio, 1931.
31. And how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had one stepsister and one half-sister.
All right. And so, probably had a normal childhood, right?
Pretty much.
Growing up a kid, do you remember World War II at all?
Yes.
And did you have any friends that were in World War II?
The neighbors had 5 boys in the family, and 3 of them were in the World War II.
And that's the Schultzes, right?
Yes, one is who became a doctor, and the other 2 boys, Norman and Ray, also were in. They went in as gunners on bombers.
On a B-17 bomber?
I think they were B-17s, yeah.
Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941?
Vaguely.
Vaguely?
I was 10 years old, and I'm sure everybody was in a panic then, and all the papers had it in. I can recall that. And yes, I can vaguely remember. So I can't remember great details about it.
In Grainger, Ohio, what did people say on World War II?
Well, great catastrophe. All the neighbor kids were going to war. A number of them got killed.
All during World War II? I mean, growing up when the war was going on and you were a teenager?
It was affected because of rationing, and we were doing without. It was a bar of soap. You had to negotiate in the store for it, go shopping from store to store to find a bar of soap. Coffee was scarce. Tires for your car. Quit making cars. I think, you know, I still remember with the boys, with the neighbors, going shopping, looking for different items they were hard.
Guys, a lot of your friends came back.
Yes.
And what do you remember about that? You remember much about that?
It was a happy time. The boys were back, and they started farming again, and Ray Schultz was raising chickens again, and like they had previous to going to the Army. And that was just about it. You know, then Norman Schultz got a job at Chevy. I can remember that shortly after that.
Right, and then you graduated from high school in what year?
1950.
And what'd you do after high school?
Well, jobs are hard to find. Nobody was hiring because of the draft. All the guys were draft age. No one would hire them. So I was lucky enough to get a job at Ohio, a gas station. So I worked there until the time I was drafted in the Army.
So before you go into the Army, though, so you were at the Ohio gas station. You were pretty handy, right?
Yeah.
Kind of mechanic a little bit.
And that actually paid off in the long run, I come to find out. That kept me from being in the infantry.
Things were going okay from the end of World War II to June 25th of 1950, when the North Koreans crossed the 38th parallel and took over basically South Korea and Seoul. Do you remember that at all?
Well, the draft was initiated, and we were all draft age, and just waiting for Uncle Sam's letter. So it was kind of touch and go, and no one knew when it was going to get it.
Did you see any news reports back then about, you know, where was Korea, where was North Korea, where was South Korea, what was it all about?
Yes, but I paid little attention to it probably as a teenage kid, and little did I know I was going to wind up there. So probably if I'd have known that, I would have been paying more attention. But
all right, so take me through when you got drafted. How'd you get drafted? And
I was drafted in January of '52, and Dorothy Kaufman, who I knew personally, and she knew me, put me in charge of all the guys that were drafted from Medina.
Explain what happened after you got drafted.
We were shipped to Fort Meade, Maryland. Were inducted in the Army, got our hair cut off, issued Army clothing, and a few days later got on the train again, bound for California.
So up until that time, had you ever been out of Grainger, Ohio? When you went to Maryland?
Yes, I think I went to a trip to Wisconsin once, but that was it. I remember going by the ball fields in Chicago, and thought that was a great event in my life.
So now you're on your way to California, huh?
On the way to California on a troop train. And I can still remember the conductor saying, 3 more days to sunny California. And I think it took forever to get there. The troop train just didn't move very fast.
So you arrived at where in California?
Fort Ord.
Fort Ord,
which
California.
Is outside of San Francisco.
Tell me about, arriving at Fort Ord and basic training.
Well, basic training was you learn to take orders, and sometimes it was really rough. I can remember that you'd want to punch this guy out because they were really rough on you verbally. They wouldn't physically, but verbally they would be. And if you didn't go along with what their ways, you'd be assigned to KP, which is working in the kitchen. So needless to say, I maybe had KP duty once because of that, but I learned in a hurry to mind my ways.
What was the hardest part about basic training?
The
discipline?
The discipline, the word I'm trying to think of. The discipline. Learning discipline. I think that was the hardest part. I mean, after it was all over, the guy would the platoon sergeant come up and shook my hand. But you knew I had a little problem taking that kind of discipline. I would rebel a little bit, I guess. But he'd come up and he even gave me a nice shirt. It was a GI shirt. And patted me on the back and just said, "You'll be all right."
You remember the guy's name?
No, I don't.
No, don't remember his name?
He was rough on us then, but we got along fine afterwards.
So how many weeks were you in basic training?
That's a good question. I think it was 13.
13 weeks?
I think it was.
And so what happened then after basic training?
Was assigned to the 44th Infantry Division in Camp Cook, which was a National Guard outfit out of Illinois. And stayed there for more extensive infantry training. And while I was there, I got a telegram from the Red Cross saying that my stepmother's father, which would be my grandfather by marriage, I guess you want to call it, whatever, was dying, and if I could come home, do so. So the Red Cross contacted me and said, if you can get there on your own, you're welcome to go. So I'm in Fort Ord, California, and have to go to Ohio. And then I come to find out, I don't remember how, but if I got to Sacramento, California, I might be able to get a hop on a military plane to Ohio. So I took a chance. I started hitchhiking. I hitchhiked from San Francisco to Sacramento and lucked out. It was a plane just going to Waco, Texas. So I got that hop to Waco, Texas, stayed there a couple hours, and there was just by luck again, there was a plane going to Chicago. An old stripped down, I think it was a B-25, no guns on it, but like riding in an orange crate. Vibration and every wind and noisy, and but it made it to Chicago. And once I got there, I took a train to Ohio, so landed to Akron.
So you hadn't been home since, you drafted in January, and then this was what time frame that you went on this trip?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
August of
August?
52.
So 8 months probably.
Or longer, yeah, about 8 months.
Probably 8 months before you'd been home.
Yeah.
And the deal was, if you found your way home, you could go.
Yeah.
And you had to pay your own way home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how long were you home?
I think 10 days, as I recall.
All right.
Like that.
And what people at home think when you got home?
Well, they were happy to see me. They hadn't heard from me. I mean, they hadn't seen me. A lot of the people, they thought I was in jail. I assured them I wasn't. And
So that was August of 53. Then what happened after that, after you went back?
shortly after we were shipped out to Washington State, where we were boarding the ships for Japan.
And this was, what was the name of the ship?
General Hugh J. Gaffney.
All right.
This was in November of that year, and I had 2 Thanksgivings that year due to crossing the international date line. So that was quite a novelty.
So going back, so you got up to Washington, and you took off on the Hugh Gaffney to Tokyo. Had you ever been on a ship before?
No. First time.
How'd that work out?
It was an experience. Sitting, particularly when you came time to eat, sitting in the galley, that was the kitchen they called on our ship, the galley, and it had rails on it. And it's good, I could understand why after being on there a little bit, because if you didn't hold on your tray and the ship would rock, all the trays would go down the other end of the table, you know, and they'd come back and forth. So that's what learning how to eat on the ship was something. And the worst thing was everybody was getting sick. The smell of vomit. The ship didn't make me sick, but all that smell continuously was getting to me after a while.
How many guys were on the ship? Any idea?
3,000.
3,000 guys all going to Tokyo.
Yep.
And did you have any buddies on the ship with you?
Yeah, Neil Emmons.
Neil was, so you hung out with him?
A few guys from I became friends with in the basic training.
All right. And so you slept underneath, right?
Yeah, bunks.
Below the ship,
Yeah,
the bunks.
yeah,
How
yeah.
was that?
Experience, you know, it's would flip, see who was on the upper or lower bunk, and actually it wasn't bad because the rocking of the ship, sometimes you got so tired of banging back and forth. It wasn't like these cruise ships were today. They ride pretty steady, but those things were like rocking back and forth continuously.
Did you go upstairs much on the deck?
Oh yeah, I was all over it. Yeah.
All the time?
Much as you could, yeah, yeah.
And so you were on that ship for 8 days?
I think it was 8 days. It's quite a while, yeah.
So how'd you pass the time?
Playing cards.
Playing what kind of cards?
You know, mostly poker.
Poker?
Yeah, I got to be pretty good at it.
You arrive in into Tokyo.
Right.
And tell me how you'd never been to another foreign country, and all of a sudden you're in Tokyo.
You're right. I'm in Tokyo, and the 3,000 guys on the ship, we all got in his barracks, the receiving area. The next morning, they called us all out for reveille, and they issued us weapons we were going to use in Korea. And they handed me this M1, and took us to the firing range to get familiar with it. And those targets weren't very far away, and they're quite big, and I couldn't hit that target with that gun. And I'm a pretty good shot. I got the sharpshooter's medal in basic, so you know there's something wrong with that gun. And I was panic stricken, thinking I'm going to war with that gun, and couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
Shoot.
Oh, it wasn't hard to shoot. It wasn't anchored. There must have been something wrong with the barrel or something.
Oh, okay.
It was just a lemon of a gun. That particular one. No, most of them were all right.
So you then in Tokyo, you were in 7 weeks in what?
Oh, well, no. Then the second day.
Oh, it's okay.
One of the most lucky days of my life, I thought. We fell out for reveille again the second day. And they started to call out names for guys going to schools in Tokyo. And I'm thinking to myself, how lucky can those guys be? One going to medic school and this and that, communication school. And lo and behold, they called my name, and I almost had a big one. I'm going to track vehicle mechanics school in Tokyo, downtown Tokyo ordnance depot. I couldn't believe it, because I'm in the infantry, and that's the last place I wanted to be honest. And so I went to Tokyo Ordnance Depot for 7 weeks school. A number of weeks afterwards, because they weren't quite ready for me in Korea, and that was it. Learned to be a track vehicle mechanic.
So did you have to take a test to test out of the infantry, or how'd you get out of it?
You took these aptitude tests when you went in the Army, and evidently I must have done well on it, because they picked me out of 3,000 guys. I thought that was phenomenal. I don't mean to say it in a bragging sense, but I was surely thankful.
How about that? So, how many weeks then in Tokyo at the school?
7 weeks of school, probably 10 or 11 anyhow. Yeah.
So what do you remember most about Tokyo?
Shimbashi Station. No, the train station.
Why is that?
I don't know. We always communicated from the base to Tokyo, the downtown area, and I can always, that's where I get off, Shimbashi Station. So
remember that?
oh yeah, yeah, it's stuck in my mind.
What did you think of the people? Because it's the first time you had met Japanese
They
people.
were friendly, yeah. Considering we were at war with them once, they...
Yeah, coming off, that was only, what, 41, 50, that's 10 or 11 years after,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor was bombed. So they're friendly to you,
Yeah.
right? And did you see the Imperial Palace?
Yes.
What'd you think of that?
Oh, beautiful. Saw Fujiyama.
Mount Fujiyama? Yeah.
Yeah, I did take in a lot of historic sites.
Did you find, did you drink any sake?
Yes.
Lots of
A
sake.
few sake.
Did you like sake?
Not really.
No, not really.
Did like the some of the food. It's really good.
And how about the sushi? Did you get into sushi at all?
No, didn't get
No
sushi.
raw stuff, meat and potatoes, huh?
Lo mein, I think was my favorite.
All right. Of your ordnance school, then what happened?
Well, we shipped out to Sasebo.
This was what time frame?
That was at about the end of the 10 weeks in.
Kind of March '53. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Around March.
Yeah, around
You
March.
shipped this out, okay?
Yeah, somewhere
That's
in
about, okay.
You know, that's where we boarded the ship for Incheon, right?
Incheon, yeah.
Yeah.
So from how far was it from where you, I imagine, Tokyo to Sasebo? How long of a boat ride? You remember?
Hard to remember.
Don't remember that?
Went by train. I know that.
Oh, you went by train
I think so. Yeah.
to Sasebo. You went by boat.
Yes. Yeah.
And how long was that? You remember?
No.
No? So now this is your second major boat trip.
Right.
Okay. So then, what are you hearing about the war? Because it's been going on for a couple years now, and you're ready to go to war. What have you heard about the war at that time?
Well, I heard about the battles and all the guys getting killed and wounded, and it's a little apprehensive with landing on the soil in Incheon, you know.
So at that time, I don't know the exact dates, but that time, the war went from being very bad for the Americans, being pushed back, right, to the peninsula, then actually being fairly good when MacArthur began pushing north, right, pushing the North Koreans back past the 38th parallel, almost to the Chinese border, and then the Chinese got involved. At what point in time, so when you got to Incheon, it was March then of 53. So I'll look that up in terms of what happened in March of 53.
Day. I can remember that.
Was MacArthur relieved of duty yet?
I can't remember.
Remember Ridgway took over?
I think he was.
So MacArthur got relieved of duty,
I think he was.
and General Ridgway took over. Yeah. Do you remember anything about Ridgway? Did you ever see the guy? Did you ever?
No.
Did you ever know about him?
Not much. I mean, you know, we were aware of it, but
yeah, because he was a big World War II, you know, hero, if you would, with the airborne. So you get to Incheon. What happened when you landed?
Well, we boarded a train for the going north, and there was no heat in the train, and not comfortable at all, board seats, and trying to lie on there to sleep on the way up. It's quite a ride. There's another one of those trains that go 2 miles forward and 1 mile backwards.
So you get on at Incheon and you're going to, do you remember the location you're shipping to?
No, I don't remember. It was just a place to get off. That's all I remember.
All right. So how many guys were on that train with you?
I can't even say that.
You remember?
It was filled up.
Filled, okay.
Different guys, different stops. They didn't all go to the 72nd. Wherever they would needed replacements, that's where they were sending them, evidently. So they would make different stops, and guys would get off.
Before we go, you went from the 44th National Guard. When did you get assigned to the 72nd? Coming out of Ordnance School?
When I landed in Incheon. I mean, yeah, it's coming out of Ordnance School. Yeah.
So you got appointed to go to the 72nd Tank Battalion.
Right, because I was a track vehicle mechanic.
Had you ever heard of the 72nd Tank Battalion before?
Never heard of it, no.
Not at all?
No.
All right. So what are you thinking on the train ride to the front line? A guy from Grainger, Ohio, right? Maybe went hunting once in a while, and all of a sudden now you're going to be faced with guys that are shooting at you. What was crossing your mind?
A lot of things. But being young and a little innocent, I guess, And we, with all the other guys still joking around and everything, we made the best of it. We weren't scared, to put it that way, you know. It just, I guess we're going to take whatever comes.
So do you think the training was very, very good and it got you ready for it?
Oh yeah.
Because early on in the Korean War, there wasn't very good training. People got thrown in the front line.
Yeah.
So you had plenty of training and you were ready for it, right?
Right.
All right. So take me through what happened when you then arrived on the front line and you got another job, different than the job you thought.
Oh, well, I was going up there as a track vehicle mechanic, but when I arrived in the company area, the fellow that I was supposed to replace hadn't rotated yet. And by rotate, I mean you would get 4 points per month for being in a combat zone, and you needed 32 points or 8 months to rotate or get out of there. So the fellow that I was replacing hadn't rotated yet, so they asked me if I could drive a personnel carrier. And I said, well, I did. In school, we drove different vehicles. So they put me in it and see if I could drive it. Yeah, you do fine, he said. So a couple days later, we went on a night run and had to pick up some wounded guys, and my first experience of what war was about.
And you're driving the carrier.
I was driving the carrier, and then no sooner got the guys in the carrier, you had to drive over top of them, and there was a hatch underneath. We'd pull them up to the hatch. And anyhow, the shells were coming in, and
were the guys wounded that you picked up?
yeah.
What they call it, turkey shoot? What does that mean?
The tanks would go out. Most of the tanks were in Korea. When I was there, were stationed behind a hill with camouflage over them, and the guys would be in a bunker. And they would go in the tanks, maybe shoot a harassing fire over the valley or whatever. But these turkey shoots would be, they'd leave their positions and go out and fire at the enemy, and then return to the places where they were encamped.
You'd also do this at night?
That particular one with the PC was a night.
Night shoot?
Yeah, but it wasn't with the tanks, as I recall. I can't remember why we was out there, but it was my first time.
All right. So you're out there retrieving these guys that are wounded and people are shooting at you, and you're driving this carrier.
And I found out that I was a pretty good driver, because I remember putting that pedal to the metal and getting out of there.
Got the hell out. So how many guys did you pick up? Do you remember?
A couple. Yeah.
A couple guys?
Yeah.
And how many times did you do this?
About twice.
Twice?
Yeah.
All
then
right.
the guy rotated and I became a mechanic. Then I was issued a Jeep, and the company area most of the time was back about 2 miles from the front line on 38th parallel where the tanks were in place. And my daily duty would be drive up to the tanks, and I had 2 or 3 assigned to me, and just make sure they were running good. The little Joe, that would be the auxiliary generator, was running, and anything needed fixed mechanically with the engine or whatever I would have to do.
And so what kind of tanks were these?
M4s.
M4s. So now all of a sudden you went from driving a personnel carrier to being asked to join the motor pool with the Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking this Jeep by yourself?
A lot of times. Sometimes I would, yeah.
Out close to the front lines?
Yeah, right up on the line, yeah.
To go help tanks that have engine problems, track problems, and anything else?
Yep.
All right. So how many of these runs did you make?
A lot. A lot.
A lot of them?
Yes.
And so what were the typical problems the tanks had, the M4s had?
Just nothing really outstanding that I can remember. They were pretty efficient vehicle. They run good. Just had to tune them up like any gas engine, and perform maintenance on them, oil changes and that type of thing, you know.
You're this time you're in the Kumwa Valley.
Yes.
And the Kumwa Valley is a big valley between 2 sets of hills.
Right on the 38th.
And
Right.
so the Americans are on one side with the tanks, right?
Right.
And you got the big valley, and then the North Koreans are on the other side.
Right.
and you're back 3 miles from the front line.
The company area was, but the tanks are right up on the line.
I got it. So you'd have to go, how they called you in, what, on walkie-talkies?
Yeah,
or
right.
They called you in.
Radio, yeah.
Radio, and you were assigned 2 tanks. And so there was a problem, you had to go to the front line and take care of the problem.
Right.
Was there any danger driving to the front line?
Occasionally, right.
Yeah, the time in which the North Koreans figured out the time that the Americans would eat food, had their meal run.
Oh, that was a real disaster. The result of it was 13 guys got killed and a number wounded. The Koreans they talked about these placements of tanks and bunkers. The guys would be at the bunkers, and this one particular area there was 2 tanks relatively close to each other, and once a day a truck would go up to these bunkers with food and hot food for the troops, at least once a day. And this one particular day, every time the truck would come up, all the guys would run out of the bunker to meet the truck because they were hungry. And the enemy had that spot zeroed in, and they put a mortar in there right on the money and killed them.
So how cold was it this time of year? Do you remember?
It was a whole lot like Ohio weather. Very much like Ohio weather. The only difference was you were out in it all the time. You had tents to go in. We were in the company area, and they were heated. But most of the time, it was a whole lot like this. You had freezing temperatures and rainy days and cloudy, and just about like Ohio weather.
So talk about the other time where you were called in to help with a tank that needed some mechanical work, and they were zeroing on you in the Jeep. You were in a Jeep driving, and they started zeroing in on your Jeep.
Oh, that time, yeah. There was part of the road that went along, was exposed to the enemy side of the valley. And I came around a corner, I remember, just a 1-lane road, dirt road. And some guys were in the ditch, 2 GIs. And another Jeep was parked over there. And the guy jumped out of the ditch and said, "You better get out of here, there's rounds coming in." So no sooner said that, and the round came in ahead of us. Great.
Any idea what caliber guns they were shooting at you?
No idea. Mortar rounds,
mortar, yep.
And landed right in the middle of the road. And we're sitting with another fellow from Ohio was with me, John Pinion. And we just kind of looked at each other, and I just floored that Jeep, put in gear and floored it.
Oh, Pinion was in with the Jeep with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And floored the Jeep and took off, and another round came in, and I sort of landed right in between the tracks where we were sitting, talking to the 2 GIs. So that's one of the better decisions in my life I made. And the bunker was only a short distance away, and we rolled over the hill and jumped out of the Jeep. It was still running, still rolling, I think, and we ran into the bunker and just sat there and looked at each other and started laughing. I don't know, we're just scared to dickens out of us.
Another time you were in a Jeep and you went up to a disabled tank, and a crew was in there, and they began to climb into the rear of the tank, and all the men got in except the second lieutenant.
They were on one of these turkey shoots you were talking about.
Yeah.
One of the tanks became disabled, and so they waited for the other tank to come for help, and they did. It came up behind it, and what the guys were doing, they were coming out of the tank and going under the tank, or the escape hatch, and they're crawling up the front of the tank to get into the one that was come to rescue them. And they all made it except the second lieutenant. And the round came in and killed him right on. Shrapnel got him right there.
Do you remember who he was? Do you remember his name?
No. I remember he was a colored second lieutenant.
Okay, wow.
And they told me to get out of there because, so I ran up on a hill, which was only maybe 100 yards away, and looking down on it when this all happened.
So how many guys were in a tank at the time? Do you remember?
It was a driver and a assistant driver and a gunner, or the tank commander, and a guy would load that 4.
4 guys in a tank.
Yeah.
So did you have to know all those parts of the tank to repair the tank, or were you primarily the track?
Not really, just the mechanical, just the
engine
keep
and
it
track.
running, track and engine and things like that. You know, starter would go bad, I'd have to replace that, or things like that.
So how long would this go on that you would have, you know, how many months went by where you were in the Jeep going out fixing the tanks during the battle and the ebb and flow of the battle?
Pretty much 8 months.
Battles raged on even as truce negotiations were taking place. On the Western Front line, battles took place along the Sachan River and the Indian River that included the Nori, Bedi, and Bumo battle areas. On the Central Front line, combat was taking place in the Blood, Eagle, Pseudo, and White Horse Hills, along the Finners Ridge and Jogyok Mountain Ranges, the Kumsan area, and Sniper Ridge. At White Horse Hill, 12 fierce battles went on for 10 days, with occupation of the area changing back and forth 14 times. Finally, the 7th Korean forces maintained occupation of the area by devastating the entire region with 60,000 tons of artillery ordnance. On the Eastern Front line, intense fighting was taking place in hills 351, 854, and 812, again, attempts by both sides to secure strategic areas. As the war crossed into 1953, battles intensified to control key areas before final truce negotiations. Thus, new fighting broke out at the Nevada Advanced Base located on the northeastern portion of Punjab, the M1 and Arrows Hills, areas around Monmouth Mountain.
What do you remember about the 8 months in terms of the living in tents, whether it be warm or cold, the food, what kind of food you ate? Do you remember anything about that?
Sea rations. I can remember spaghetti was my favorite diet. They had beans, and pork and beans, and something else. But about the only thing, I'd always try to get the spaghetti. I can remember that. And I didn't think I'd ever eat spaghetti again, but I still like it for some reason. And the food was at Christmas time and Thanksgiving, and they really put a spread on for us. It was amazing. I always thought that was wonderful. Yeah.
And what didn't you like? What food didn't you like? You remember anything you really didn't like?
Well, I mean, the SOS that we had for breakfast, I wasn't too wild about that.
That shit on the shingles, right?
That's what that is, right?
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I ate it, you know, and we had eggs and powdered eggs most of the time.
So would you ever shot the gun then? You were worried about the M1 shooting a gun. Then you're on the front line in a Jeep getting tanks fixed up, bringing them back. Had you ever shot the gun then at that time?
Not a rifle, but I was just getting ready to rotate myself, and was one of my last trips up on the line to repair a tank. And I'm talking to the crew of this tank, telling them I'm just about ready to rotate, and I have never fired a shot at the enemy. I said, that won't be a very good story to tell my grandchildren. He says, well, we can fix that up. I said, how do you mean? He says, you ever fire that 50 caliber on the tank? I said, yeah, we had that in basic training. I can fire that 50. He said, well, get in that tank. You know, they were sitting in the bunker while they're telling me. They said, go get up there in that tank. He says, fire off a box of rounds. He says, you'll see the tracers going out over the valley. He said, when you get done, just get in the tank, close the hatch, and turn the radio on. I said, why do that? He said, you'll find out. So I did what they said. And no sooner got back in the tank and I heard these rounds bouncing off the tank. So the enemy was answering me.
All right, you drew fire.
Right, I drew fire.
All right.
And the guys, I could hear them on the radio laughing.
All right, so now it's July 1953, and the ceasefire happened. Where were you when the ceasefire happened? Were you
Right up there in Kumah Valley.
Kumah Valley, huh? And what came to your mind at that time when it?
Well, like I say, I was thankful that there's a good chance of getting home uninjured.
Yep. So you had enough points.
I had enough points coming up right. I think I had a month ago, or July, August, September. I had 3 months ago.
Finally, both parties agreed to set up the front line around which both troops were clashing as the military demarcation line. The exchange of POWs was a different story, however. At that time, about 170,000 prisoners of war from the North were committed to Koje Island Camp in South Korea, with over 70,000 refusing to go back to the North. The UN troops insisted on humanitarian repatriation and respect for the free will of the prisoners, whereas the North insisted on the unconditional return of all captives. This disagreement led to a truce deadline. Since then, the war took another turn in 1952, negotiation on one side and battle on the other. With the death of former USSR Prime Minister Stalin in 1953, the North again requested for the resumption of peace talks, which were at a standstill. This time, however, talks progressed rapidly, with the sick and wounded prisoners exchanged in April. With ceasefire talks rapidly progressing, South Koreans who opposed a truce without unification launched fierce demonstrations. Moreover, then President Lee unilaterally released the prisoners of war who were against communism to show his objection to the truce. Although these actions almost led to the total collapse of talks, both parties were eager to stop the war. At 10 p.m. on July 27, 1953, General Harrison, a representative of the UN forces, and General Na Mil, the representative of the North, finally signed the truce agreement. Despite the absence of the South Korean representative who refused to sign, the truce agreement was finally concluded among the commanders of the UN troops, the Supreme Commander of the North Korean People's Army, and the commander of China's supporting military that same day. All battles, which had lasted for 3 years, 1 month and 2 days, stopped at 10 p.m. on July 27, 1953.
In July of 52, the last shot was fired. That's one of the happiest days of my life also. Well, we're going to make it home the way it looks.
So then what happened? Where'd you ship off to? You shipped out of Incheon again?
Went back to Incheon, and then
you returned to Washington? Is that where you
yeah,
did?
returned to Washington. Yeah,
D.C. or the state of Washington?
State of Washington.
State of Washington.
Yeah.
And then how'd you get home from there? You took a train or?
Yeah, right. Another train.
And did you get home for Christmas?
Yes, since I had enough points to rotate, and I was so close to being getting my 2 years of service in, which was required because I was drafted, they were going to discharge me early. So I got out a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks earlier than actually my 2 years, so I didn't spend a full 2 years in there. But they let us go home. We got home right around the holidays, and they let us go home for Christmas and New Year's, and we had to come back New Year's Day to Chicago, Illinois, post there, and get discharged, and that's what we did. I rode back with Don Dixon, who I met on the ship on the way home. He was from Akron, and that's what we did.
So now you're finally home, and when you got home, who was there to greet you? Was your buddy?
My buddy Wes Weber in Akron train station.
All right, so you had been gone then since what date? How long?
A year and a couple months, I guess.
You had to be glad to be home, huh?
Oh, very glad, yeah.
All right, so what happened then after you got home?
Just resumed normal life, I guess, as a civilian. Was in the National Guard, but never was activated.
All right. So then you went on to get married. What year did you get married?
1955.
1955, and you had 3 kids?
3 kids.
All right. Now you're 80 years old, and when you look back at Korea, some people, say it was a conflict. It really wasn't a war. Although when you go back...
They say it was a police action. Then they finally decided, well, I guess it was a war. After 50,000, or how many got killed?
Over 50,000.
50,000 got killed,
died.
yeah.
So then we went to the Washington, the memorial, the Korean memorial.
Oh, yeah.
What'd you think of that?
Oh, that was awesome. Right. 19 statues there representing the 38th parallel. Reason they didn't put 38, there was too many, and they put a wall, reflective wall behind the 19 images, and you look at it and it looks like 38 standing there. So that commemorates 38th parallel.
Now that you're 80 years old in 2011, looking back in the early 50s, what do you think now about what you were asked to do in Korea and the part you played, and what are some of your feelings now about, you know, the appreciation people have for what you did, and when you see people, when you wear your Korea hat out, you know, compared to some of your friends that were in World War II, how do you feel about that?
I think it's amazing how few people actually know what you do when you're in the Army. I don't think they give you credit, you know, that they should. But, you know, you go to Veterans Day with a cap on, everybody thanks you for serving. Otherwise, I don't think it's really appreciated as much as you know, a lot of people hardly know what's going on in war, unless they have family directly involved.
Do you stay in touch with any of the guys you fought with at all?
Yes, one fellow from Warren, Ohio, John Pinion, I call him on occasion.
And you recently got together.
Yes.
How was that? Did you?
Wonderful. Yeah, we had good old times talking about the good old times and all the guys we knew and what happened to them. And
So any closing thoughts that you like to leave with people about the Korean War, your service in the Korean War, and anything else?
well, to be honest, when you were in the war, you kept asking the question, why am I here? And they finally said to us, well, you're here to stop the aggression of communism. Well, we took that as face value, evidently. But sometimes you really wonder why you are there, you know. Is it a political thing or what it's all about?
Well, you look now in 2011, and we're still having problems with the North Koreans.
Yeah, you're right.
So just think, if we wouldn't have done something, what would have happened? Right, all these years.
Yeah, it should probably still be one country. It wouldn't be North and South.
Yeah. Do you have any interest in going back ever? Or
I don't know.
once is enough, huh?
Right now I don't, because I'm getting too old. But maybe earlier I probably would have, yeah, if I had the opportunity.
All right.
Yeah.
So, you know, as your son, it's been an honor, Dad, to talk to you about this. It's been an honor to know what you did. I always heard stories, but we really haven't got the entire story. And this will be passed down through the generations as a way of saying thank you. And you are a member of the greatest generation. And that's because of what you did and what you did when you got back, more importantly.
Right.
So thank you.
And I got to commemorate you for taking all the time with the veterans and Veterans Administration and whatever, what you have done for them. And my heart goes out to you.
Thank you for your service.